Hey, it's Jordan with TYT. Still here in the People's Summit between panels. I follow this guy a lot and now get to talk to him, Fang from The Intercept. You're an investigative journalist for them. You kind of do it all. A lot of kind of exposing the really toxicity of money in politics. Also, a lot of stuff with the national security state. Obviously, working alongside Glenn Greenwald, who's done a lot of great work. You spoke today about journalism and the media in a panel, and I found it interesting because a lot of people interested in journalism might not know that what you do, which is kind of expose a lot of the links and connections between politicians, corporations, all the entire revolving door. It's not that it's easy, but a lot of people can do that. There's ways. Can you kind of talk about how, money in politics and that kind of subtopic of journalism is expanding now?
There are a lot of bad things to say about the state of media in terms of the corporate consolidation, in terms of the way cable news has really, this has always been an issue, but really devolved into information, entertainment, covering the trivial, or taking politics and turning it into like a soap opera, not digging deep into the issues at hand. That being said, there are some very positive developments. The internet has leveled the playing field. Anyone with something interesting to say, with unique documents or other original source documents, can present those on the internet, and if they can verify them, it can be a story in its own. I reminded people recently at our panel that there are so many skills that journalists use that don't require a lot of learning. You don't need a graduate degree to understand this stuff, and can be extremely useful, especially given how many journalists have lost their job, how many communities don't have beat reporters covering politics or covering City Hall. For one thing, records requests. Since the 70s, we've had these open record laws, and there are iterations of these laws, not just on the federal side, but on state level, county level, municipal level, where if you're interested in what your government is up to, you can file these requests and receive documents, whether they're emails among public officials, budget documents, police records. You can file for this, and if your local media outlet is not covering important public issues, you can step up to the plate, and as long as you're being fair and making sure that the evidence that you're presenting is verifiable, it can be a real public service that is akin or equivalent to regular mainstream journalism. So, records requests are one way. So many documents are now digitized in terms of asking for judicial dockets. Many courthouses are going digital. From San Francisco, I can report on abuses going on in Alabama or wherever because they're doing so much to put documents on the web that can be downloaded or analyzed. And I don't want to talk too much about this, but again, because political institutions and politicians are adapting for the web, they're live streaming their press conferences. There are people going to town halls and putting that video on the web. You can report on them without physically being there. So there are just boundless opportunities if you have the time. And again, for a lot of people, this is a privilege. If you're busy, you're taking care of your family, you're going to your normal job. It's tough to find the time for this, but there are opportunities if you can squeeze it into your day.
And I think I always kind of knew about the toxicity of how money taints our politics, but being on the ground and reporting the last few months, I've kind of seen that people who take the money, the politicians who take the money, their usual MO is, well, can you prove that anything exchanged? Whereas how I see it is, it's not just about the quid pro quo, it's about how you view the world, who you surround yourself with. In your reporting, and you've broken so many stories on connections between lobbyists and all sorts of things that you have politicians, for example, Hillary Clinton, talks a good game and then goes have fundraising dinners the same night with those people she says she's going to be tough on. But for you, have you seen the problem kind of get worse, or has it pretty much stayed the same? There's just now suddenly the spotlight is on it.
Well, a little bit of both, right? Like for a very long time, but this trend really accelerated in the 70s, and it's only gotten worse every year. If you're a wealthy person or a powerful special interest group or a corporation, the way that you set policy outcomes in America is to spend money in politics. And too often people think about this as a narrow type thing, that, okay, it's only, this donation to a politician. But no, if you look at how interest groups in America operate, money to the politician is a small part of their public affairs budget. So if you're, a big fossil fuel company or a big bank, you're spending money in campaign contributions and super PAC donations, but you're also funding a trade association so you can ally with similar businesses. You're funding academic studies that then support your policy preferences, saying that certain closing a certain tax loophole would kill jobs or something. You're funding PR people to go out and help producers at TV shows craft the right stories that set your agenda. You're funding advertisements in media outlets to remind them that you're in an important constituency. So I think for folks who are concerned about the role of money in politics, that special interest groups have a disproportionate say above regular people or the public interest, they have to look at this from a holistic point of view, or think about it from a corporation's point of view. There are many ways that they can agenda set beyond campaign contributions. And really, if you're able to control the public narrative, to basically set what is acceptable and what are the policy choices in front of people, in front of politicians, then you don't need to buy someone off. You've already limited debate to the policy preferences that are beneficial to you.
Do you think, you see now on television news, now that Bernie's, not formally conceded, but they're pretty much moving on Hillary versus Trump, and money is off the table. It's all anti-Trump coverage now, the xenophobia, rightly so. I mean, there's a lot to cover, but as soon as they could do it, they moved off of the money in politics issue, because a lot of those companies are owned by corporations that are part of that revolving door. How do you see it going forward without a presidential candidate, that the relationship between governors, presidential candidates, what have you, with banks, corporations, lobbyists, even on the lower level, judges, it's all like a backroom culture.
Yeah.
How do you think that? Do you think that problem is going to stay in the forefront even without a Bernie Sanders running? And how do? Because there's only one Intercept, there's only one Lee Fang, there's more people coming along, but how do you keep that? Because as Cenk would tell you, as I agree, I mean, that's the fundamental problem of our time.
I agree, it's the fundamental issue for any economic policy reform or any reform that affects money. This is in the background, right? So I agree with Cenk and I agree with yourself that it is kind of fundamental for reform, and it's difficult to say. Will people care about this? Because the way that a lot of these groups or interest groups operate, they're very sophisticated, and it's not obvious how they're influencing the process. It takes a lot of digging. It's purposefully concealed from the public. I don't know. I mean, there was a really interesting moment in that you had a candidate that obsessed over this issue and talked about it and got people, galvanized and interested.
If you want a candidate who is prepared to stand up to big money interests, to take on the greed of corporate America, the fraud of Wall Street. If you want that candidate, we need your help. And amazingly, in the last 11 months, we have received almost 7 million individual campaign contributions.
And I don't know if people will care. What I do know is that this issue, in terms of the problems it poses for the policymaking process, for democracy, will only grow. How people will activate and maybe engage in social movements to address this, it's hard to predict. And, I personally think there are a lot of ways to approach this. There are a number of good government groups that say that we need new laws, we need to overturn Citizens United, but it's really not that simple. We do have a number of campaign finance laws that are simply not enforced. I did a story a while back looking at the Lobbying Disclosure Act. Federal law says if you're lobbying policymakers, members of Congress, you have to disclose who your clients are, how much they're paying. You have this quarterly disclosure form. Well, and this law was updated after the Jack Abramoff scandal, right? Democrats said they're going to drain the swamp and they're going to add criminal penalties to this law. Well, we did a story a while back showing, yeah, it's great they passed this law, but for the lobbyists who don't comply, who don't register, there's literally been zero enforcement ever. The FBI doesn't have any people, looking in terms of looking into enforcement. The DOJ is not looking into it. There's a little clerk's office on Capitol Hill that's supposed to monitor lobby disclosure. Basically, if you're a lobbyist and you're, peddling influence on Capitol Hill, and you figure out a creative way to sidestep registration, or you just refuse to comply with the law, there's no cop on the beat. So I think for folks who are interested in cleaning up corruption and getting rid of undue influence, yes, there needs to be reform. The process needs to be changed, but we also need a better media. We also need the old laws that we already have to be enforced. So it's a complicated issue, and because special interest groups have done such a good job in funding public relations and funding institutions that obscure the problem. Just to get back to what you originally said, that the cable networks are no longer interested in money and politics. I mean, one interesting thing that actually Bill Clinton proposed when he was in the White House was that if you're FCC-regulated broadcaster, you've got to take a little bit of your advertising time and give it for free to candidates running for office. So that way, that negates the need to constantly fundraise if you can get a little bit of free airtime for everyone who runs for Congress if they meet a certain threshold of support. Obviously, the broadcasters, the media companies hated this idea. They lobbied against it furiously. They destroyed the idea under Clinton. It was re-proposed under McCain-Feingold in, I think, 2002. The broadcasters, the big media companies lobbied to kill this idea because this would cost them money. They love it that these super PACs are spending huge amounts of money on TV advertisements. And again, we entrust the media to explain these issues to us, to give us all the policy options so we can have an informed democracy. But have you seen any of the cable networks discuss this idea once? No, because for obvious reasons.